Hello and welcome to another of the filmed and live conversations that I have with the Chief Constable, asking her the questions on behalf of you, our communities. This is an opportunity for me to ask on your behalf pressing questions of the moment that come out of you, our communities. So, Chief Constable, first question. Call handling and community engagement with policing. It's been stressed for some time. At our last meeting, you and those who watch these filmed conversations will know that I asked you about 101 calls specifically, and I asked what is being done to reduce call waiting times, and I've since had conversations with you and challenged you about the broader engagement that's necessary across all the social media to ensure that the public have confidence that their reporting and response from policing reassures them and increases what was beginning to be a lessening of that public confidence. Going forward, it's essential that the public receive regular updates about this from you and from these kind of conversations. There is, I believe, a plan for further improvement and engagement, and that's why it's important that we take the community with us as we seek to restore their confidence with the progress that's made. So can you outline what progress has been made since our last meeting and indicate what or when further progress can be anticipated that will be evident to the public, not just internally to policing?
No, of course, Commissioner, and starting with 101, which is an essential service for public contact. Of course, it is by far the biggest route by which the public seek our help. And it is a stretch, and I am worried about it, and I share your concerns, so I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk about it. In Hampshire Constabulary, we know and we plan for the summer being a very, very busy period, of course. But even by our own modelling, again this year, and last year was the build on the year before, the numbers of calls, both emergency and non-emergency, are going up and up and up and up and up, and that is a significant stretch for us. So there is a reality of many more 101 calls coming in. In fact, last weekend, just gone, we had a call every 30 seconds. That's the busyness of calls coming into us. We will always prioritise 999 calls. So the way our system works is we have the same people who can interchange between emergency and non-emergency. So of course, our emergency calls always get the priority. And of course, if they're up, then the numbers of people able to answer 101s is reduced. The other thing, as well as the numbers of calls going up, is the handling time. So I place an awful lot of responsibility and professional skill on those call handlers. So they have very significant things to do around recording crime, of course, also about victim codes, really ensuring they ask the right questions to get behind the initial report to really understand what is going on. So that takes time. And therefore the amount of time that a call is taking has also gone up a little bit. So that makes that impact. However, even during really busy periods, last weekend was particularly busy, about half of our non-emergency calls are answered within a minute. So we're getting to a lot of them very, very quickly, and nearly 3/4 are answered within 7 minutes. So it's still not where I want it to be. It's certainly not, I know, where you and the public want it to be, but it is, we're holding as much as we possibly can. One of the things nationally, because 101 is such a core element of the public service, what we know nationally is about half of calls to the 101 are not for the police, they're for other services. And there's all sorts of reasons behind that, and nationally there's work going on to look at it. But we see that too. So of course what worries me is about what's in that queue waiting when we're perhaps answering calls that aren't for us as a primary service, is there may well be people who really need us in that 101 call. So I would always urge people, if it's an emergency, use 999. It is our priority line, we will answer it. And if people are really worried, please do use 999. But it is a concern for us. We've put in police language, we've put a gold command in. What that means is we've got a specific bespoke command around this summer to make sure that every day, several times a day, we're looking at our call lists, we're looking at where our staffing is, we're being as flexible as we can with the people who've got the skills, and it is a very skilled job answering the calls into policing as much as we possibly can. So we're doing everything we can. We're trying to keep people and minimise distractions as we go into the summer. So that's what we're doing. What I also really would like to take this opportunity, though, is to ask for the public to do their part too, and to really think about ringing the police if you need us, but also use the single online home. If you look at Hampshire Constabulary and you Google it, up comes a website through which you can report all sorts of things that historically were only available to you on the phone. So that's things like antisocial behaviour, it's things like reporting a crime, it's things like non-injury traffic incidents, anything really that can wait but you still need and want the police to know about, and of course we want to know about it. So much of that can be reported online, and I would really encourage people to use that.
Okay. A couple of things, a quick one. We will for a while still need to care for some people who are vulnerable, who are not digitally connected.
Of course.
That's on your mind too, I
very,
hope.
very much so. So it will never be the case that Voice 101 non-emergency is unavailable. And of course we have a number of face-to-face police stations that people can still report into, and indeed lots of people patrolling in our neighbourhood teams who can also be spoken to. So there's lots of routes in for us. But you know, as time goes by, we'll also have all sorts of other technology available as the private sector currently does. But today we don't have that, and in the
growing
future
numbers
we will.
of people are digitally
Absolutely.
savvy, and that's their preferred route.
And it's the preferred route.
That's the other half of that coin.
It's the preferred route. Yes.
Did I hear you say, I believe I did, and I believe I know, that the call handling is becoming increasingly complex,
Yes.
and requiring greater skills from those who are doing it? It's not just handing on information or capturing that first level of information. There's a lot of interaction in the handling bit rather than just receiving a call.
Of course. So you know, all staff in policing and volunteers, our job is to be professionally curious. So we need to look behind the initial report. We need to ask probing questions to find out exactly what is or isn't going on, in order that we can both do our part as well as we can from a policing perspective, but also perhaps, and often do, send a call, an incident straight to someone else who's better skilled or placed to deal with it. So it requires conversation in order to be able to do that well.
And so my concern as the Police and Crime Commissioner, listening to the members of the public, is that maybe they haven't understood that increasing complexity. And maybe often they don't need to, but for you and I, the challenge is going to be, do we have the right capacity going forward to understand that growing need to handle the calls and to assess them, however efficiently you do it, still takes added time. And can I challenge you that as we are about to set off after the summer break, to look at setting the long-term funding for you to present this core part of our engagement with the public, so that it is right resourced into the future and recognises probably a need for it to grow, and therefore a challenge alongside other priorities. Because I absolutely hear and have heard the whole time I've been the Police and Crime Commissioner, members of the public wanting an evidently fast, timely and engaged response. And I know you and the team, and I with you, have been working on resourcing that. But if the complexity is rising, we need to be really clear that it's not resourcing to where we were some while ago, it's resourcing for what will be required in the future. Absolutely,
and I'll be happy for us to have those conversations as we move into financial planning for next year and beyond. I think in addition to that, it's recognising that when one looks at where the peak non-emergency calls come in, they come in at 4 o'clock Monday to Friday. So that for me tells a story that we are still a service that answers the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Lots don't. And I totally understand, therefore, why at the moment the public feel that the best place to go is the police service. But you're right around resourcing, and for me the operational risk balance is I want to do the very best with the call we are answering right now and be professionally curious and ask so we can give the best service we possibly can to that person, balancing with the risk in the queue that worries me, because that's an unknown risk that's waiting for us. So that will always be the balance. But in terms of resourcing it, absolutely.
So short-term pressures, you're on it.
Very much so.
Longer term, it's on your mind, and I can expect to hear your proposals for that more strategically and long-term, looking to the future.
Yes.
Good, thank you. There'll be some resonance between the questions that I'm asking you today for some of the answers, because it does join up. It is a whole service to the community that comes from policing and a service with partnerships. So my next question focuses on antisocial behaviour. High on the list of public and community concern is antisocial behaviour. It's a bone of contention for the public and our communities with policing, even in times when they recognise that you're stretched for resources. Recent research conducted by my team with the public has showed and reinforced and given us a strong evidence base that antisocial behaviour ranks above other types of crime, including violent crime and drugs and alcohol, as a top reason why people feel unsafe. There's clearly a need to do more to address antisocial behaviour if we're to have inclusive societies and people feeling safe and able to realise their potential. For example, I'm funding a number of youth diversionary activities across the Constabulary in association with policing, in association with the communities, as a way to tackle some of the root causes and reduce demand on policing too. And other partners are playing their part. But could you outline the policing response to antisocial behaviour that the public should expect at the moment, and perhaps include how you're working with local authorities? You kind of put the flag up in the last answer to tackle issues that may not be primarily for the police to deal with.
Absolutely, and antisocial behaviour, as you really clearly spell out, is a very significant concern for communities. So in of itself, it matters for that reason, but it also matters, as you say, because if communities feel confident, they keep themselves safer. So that whole sense of a cohesive society, people looking out for each other, confident in their own public spaces, reduces crime, keeps everyone safer. So there's that driver as well for me. So it will always be a focus for us, and it always has been. And that is why we have our combined commitment to neighbour policing teams, both officers, PCSOs, special constables, volunteers, cadets and beyond, because they are the ones who are really able to tackle antisocial behaviour, amongst many other things that they so ably do as well. And antisocial behaviour is a real catch-all phrase for so many things, particularly as the sun starts to come out. So we know about rowdiness, it can be nuisance neighbours, it can be fly posting, it can be fly tipping, it can be street drinking, environmental damage, the list goes on. So it's a real catch-all phrase for all of that. And because it's a catch-all phrase, the way it's tackled is through community safety partnerships at the local level, of which the police are a very core partner, with local authority, with youth offending, with parish councils, and so on and so forth. So we work out, who can do what tactically, and it is a team effort. So the police do the police aspects, and others do theirs so well as well. Because the point is how can we best stem it? So the community safety partnerships are our route as the police service for doing that. That's where we share information. That's where on a very regular basis, weekly, and sometimes it can be more frequently that, of course, if it's very urgent. We'll find out who knows what, we'll agree who's going to do what. Really important that we keep communities informed and involved in that. And try and get upstream of it as well. So that's where early intervention and the diversionary schemes that you describe are essential to stop this happening and stem the kind of flow of antisocial behaviour that goes on. But more broadly as well, there's things like the Troubled Families programmes, there's youth offending teams, there's trading standards, there's children and adult services. There's so many people who are involved in this, and it's the community safety partnerships who are the route through. And we've got lots of examples whereby, as well as dealing with the here and now symptoms of a nightly, often, situation in a street, we don't just deal with that. We work out the cause and we go after the cause. So we've had great success across the Constabulary area in closing premises that are perhaps the area whereby people are congregating, the noise, the rowdiness, the screaming tires are coming from, and there's been great success. And that's what I want us to do. I want us to deal with the symptoms, but really understand the cause and close those down. And often it's trading standards, interestingly, that can close a premise down, to give you an example, because they have really significant powers, as can the fire service. So everyone is in this together, and it is a priority for us. But I also know that it's seasonal, and we're about to get into the summer holidays, and unfortunately that can see a rise.
So I think the community asked two questions, or the nature of two questions. The first is the very strong sense that there's no point in reporting ASB because policing won't be interested in it at all. They tell us there's always much higher priorities to deal with, and that even if they're not experiencing antisocial behaviour, doesn't help the confidence for some members of the community. And they not infrequently, and in very significant numbers say, but it also gives those who are creating the nuisance and the antisocial behaviour a sense of licence. I do know that practically policing does intervene at some points. It signposts others to intervene. Could you perhaps respond to the sense of licence that people feel when they're not behaving well? Is tasking for our neighbourhood teams, is a call out and response, the triaging of that in the call handling environment to actually know that this has gone beyond something and it includes the policing? And do you think the answer and routinely communicating the answer that you gave earlier should reassure the public that they should be more confident in the triaging that you're doing and the response, but the recording and reporting? Well,
everything's always recorded, and I always really encourage people to report. There is going to be a there and then prioritisation of what we can turn out to and what we can't, and that is absolutely true. But I would still rather I'd still rather local authorities knew. If it's noise, that's an environmental services area. So tell the services, don't just tell the police, going back to the 101 aspect and the 101 calls that we talked about before, because this is about building a picture often, working out what the premise is, working out what the drivers are, and then dealing with it in the cold light of day. I know that doesn't help at 2 a.m. I do understand that, when the noise is happening and when people can't sleep. I do understand that. But the hard realities are, yes, there may well be a different priority for my staff in the early hours, but absolutely in the cold light of day, as a partnership, we should and we do take that very seriously and work out who can do what when. But it isn't something that the police often lead on.
So I hope the audience for these campus meetings will grow. I hope, and I know we put it online so it's available to people, so that if they have an issue they can be signposted to some of this. Can I ask you, is there something, if more people were hearing your answer now, they'd be well informed and they may not welcome but understand the point you're taking. Most of the public reach into your constabulary at a more junior level and at a very local level. Are you confident that at that level, in their voices, they're able to reassure, explain, put in context the answers, so that that first contact with the public lands reasonably, even if it doesn't give them the answer that people are expecting?
My hope and expectation is yes. Certainly through the contact, the call handling world, they're very well briefed. They have, as you'd imagine, they have so many documents that come up electronically, so they know exactly where we are on particular policies and activities. So I'm very confident there. And then more locally in the neighbourhood teams, to your point, those are absolutely owned by the local district commanders, the chief inspector, who is right at the heart of that community safety partnership. So I would expect that a local neighbourhood team will understand their local nuance, their local priorities, their themes. It is different from the Test Valley to Petersfield to Portsmouth. That's the nature of policing, and that's why we have neighbourhood teams who are able to flex and understand that. So my expectation very strongly is that they have the right information at their fingertips and the right local knowledge to understand their context, yes.
It clearly and starkly doesn't always land that way.
And
so my encouragement, in the same of looking for the right resources and the right opportunity for that local engagement, whether it's another 15 or 30 seconds of just landing those messages. And it's particularly at risk when your officers and all of those who support the front line of all the varieties, whether it's staff or specials or in the whole of the police family, that ability to be robust in the answers, be appropriate in the answers, be appropriate in the triaging of risk in the way that you would want them to be, and I believe they do, but have that moment to reassure or to create opportunities to reassure the public so that they're better informed. Because for every member of the public who walks away without that reassurance, whether they'll hear it or not is a different question, but it's multiplied 100 times by the stories that happen. A better informed engagement would allow the public to focus on the things that are the most important to them through me to you or directly to policing, but with an understanding. I think at the moment one of the byproducts of the pressure that many of our colleagues are under is that is something that's really hard. You've dealt with an issue, you're not able to deal with an issue, but having that opportunity to have more people closer to the very local, with a voice, not to lose that priority.
I think that's fair. What I would say is, we are both always hungry for more, but we have fantastically high community confidence in Hampshire Constabulary across our area, which we're very proud of. I want more, but we're very proud of that.
Yeah, that's the aspiration, and much of the delivery, I agree.
Yeah.
But for key contributors in the community, it's a small effort might repay the dividends for confidence and reassurance. You will know that as well as I do. You have spoken about the greatest threats and the 999 calls, and that's what you need to do. So my next question is in that sort of area, confidence in reporting rape and sexual assault. There's a lot of national attention recently, which sets some of the agenda, whether it has been experienced locally or not experienced locally. The reading of the news and listening to it raises a sense of lack of confidence for women that they feel in reporting rape and sexual assault to the police. It's vital, of course, that women and indeed men feel that when they report a crime of this nature they'll be listened to and that the police will pursue the case as far as the evidence allows. Currently, Hampshire Constabulary is marked for people who look at scorecards as 7th out of the 8th most similar forces in terms of further action being taken by police once a crime of rape is reported. And if you just looked at that list, that's not an acceptable or comfortable place to be. So can you reassure me that Hampshire Constabulary is making every effort to improve its results in this area, so that people can feel confident in reporting crimes of rape or sexual assault? And you might like to include some context across the criminal justice system of partner challenges and concerns that relate to outcomes for victims and the vulnerable, and how we improve the sense for victims that they've had fair hearing and justice.
This is one of my personal priorities, and you're absolutely right. So formal action taken is when someone is charged to court. That's what that means, and we are not where we should be, but then actually neither is anywhere in this country. And what I am genuinely concerned about, as many of my peer group are, is how profoundly difficult it is to charge a serious sexual offence to court. So I'm really glad you're asking the question around it. So charging rates are stubbornly low across the country, and they are here in Hampshire, and it is one of my personal priorities. And just to give you a sense of context, 5 years ago, just shy of 2/3 of cases were charged of those that had gone to the CPS, and now it's just over 1/3. So you've had this significant change in the proportion, even over 5 years, of cases that are charged. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, and it is, as you say, very, very much, and rightly so, in the public eye at the moment. We, through your funding, have excellent partnerships across our area, because the criminal justice route is a very important one when someone has suffered a rape, a man or a woman or a child. But that isn't always the route through, and I can explain why. So what is as important is that that person feels supported, that they can work through it, they're safeguarded for the future, and there's some fantastic services, brilliant, second to none services across our area, which is available to people. And the feedback that my constabulary gets from victims of this most horrific crime is very, very positive. They feel brilliantly supported by investigators, they feel brilliantly supported in terms of their ongoing safeguarding and ability to build from what's happened to them. And I'm really glad, as I know you are, that reported rape is going up and up and up, because what that signals to me is that people do have confidence in policing, that they do feel they'll be respected and supported through. And I know they will be. I get lots of feedback from individuals as well as from surveys to say that's the case for us. So I would expect that increase to continue, frankly, which is welcome. So what's happened recently, and it's been in the news, and it is a very real thing in terms of the criminal justice investigation of a rape, is around disclosure. And what happened in the R.V. Allen case in 2017, people watching this may remember, was about the disclosure of digital material and the test that was put in place about the disclosure of that digital material. Those are very big, knotty issues. Policing nationally, Crown Prosecution Service nationally, courts, defence, all of us together are working to work through that. It is complicated, it is a real wicked problem, but we absolutely must do it. And therefore, what that means is there's an increased look at what are reasonable lines of inquiry, what's third-party material that's reasonable, that's relevant. These are all tests that have to be decided by various people within all of that mix. And the other aspect that's changed most recently is the volume of digital evidence. If one thinks about now how much available people have in their handheld devices, how much is on the cloud, in their personal cloud storage and beyond, it is huge. And there has to be, and rightly for natural justice, a sense of what in that is relevant or not relevant to point towards or away from a prosecution. And that's the job of the police to look through that. There's also the issue about non-recent reporting. So I will always welcome people coming to tell us however long after the event, and we will always receive people well. Non-recent reporting, of course, has different challenges in terms of forensic retrieval. If the material isn't there, it's not there. You can't find it. So, and over half of our cases are over a week old, and that's the forensic window in terms of material exchange between people. So it's up to the police to find the evidence that points towards or away from a case, and then it's up to the CPS then to decide to charge or not. And they have their own tests. They have evidential tests, they have public interest tests, quite rightly, but it's up to them to put those tests in place. And we work hand in glove with the CPS in our area to do this well. We've put additional people, police people, into the CPS so that we're not waiting for files to go backwards and forwards, even though they're electronic. We want someone having conversation. If we're missing something, let's do it quickly. Let's put it right fast, because justice has to be swift as well. So we want to get this through as quickly as we possibly can. We've got, through your funding, a huge number of dedicated officers and staff who deal with serious sexual offences. We have as many serious sexual offences reported to us a year as we have house burglaries. They are very complex, but we have invested very significantly and very purposefully into the investigative team. So we have dedicated people for adult victims, we have dedicated people for child victims, we have dedicated people for historic cases as well, and all of those have slightly different skill sets, but all of those are important to us. And to give you a sense of how we focus our work, so our Amber Stain team are the team, there's 60 of them, who deal with survivors or help support survivors of rape, adult survivors of rape. And they're there to ensure the best evidence is gathered at the very first opportunity, of course, but thereafter as well. And they're also referred and supported to those other agencies who do brilliant stuff in supporting survivors of rape, Yellow Door, Aurora New Dawn, and others. They're fantastic services, which of course are non-police and rightly so. But the other aspect that's their priority is to protect the public through relentlessly pursuing those who've committed that harm. We want to put people through the courts if the evidence is there, and we also want to use civil remedies. So there are sexual offence prevention orders that we can put around to stop harm happening again in the future. And we've had some extraordinary successes. You may remember in the press quite recently, we had the awful case of an 18-year-old student in Southampton who was raped by someone she didn't know. That offender has been charged and is in court again later this month. We also had in Winchester, where you and I are today, a taxi driver sentenced to 12 years for raping a woman in his taxi a couple of years ago. And we also had, and this is a very important example to give, a very successful prosecution of a man who raped a sex worker. There is a view somehow that the police don't take attacks against sex workers seriously. Far from it. We take them very seriously indeed, and we had someone sentenced to 8.5 years for rape against a sex worker. And to your point in your question, this isn't just about female victims either. There have been a number of male victims, and again some very successful prosecutions with very significant jail sentences for offences against men. So we take it very seriously. We have very dedicated, significant numbers of people dedicated to it. The harsh reality is it is a very high bar evidentially now to get to court. And then, of course, it's a matter then for the court itself, and justice will take its path. But it is very, very difficult indeed because of the complexity of the cases, because of the disclosure rules, which are there for everyone's safety. I don't argue against them, but they are difficult to work through. And then, of course, the amount of digital material, which is very topical at the moment.
Right. So, Chief Constable, first, thank you for that personal commitment. Professional understanding and explanation and expression of the priority given in the constabulary for specialist people and across the constabulary to deal with these really difficult offences. I want to come back in a minute, but I think it's right to ask you, to give you a challenge that's been given to me by a member of the public who particularly wanted me to ask you a specific question. I think you've given much of the answer already, but given that answer might have been available, and someone has still written in the words I'll just give you in a moment, if this is an outlier, one person who's still feeling a particular pressure, without over-personalising it or being particular, for someone who finds themselves still concerned, maybe the answer to this is reassurance and a focus of where to go. So I received a question from a member of the public who'd like to ask you, and asked me to ask you specifically, Chief Constable, why victims of childhood sexual abuse and rape are not believed, and why, in his or her view, police officers are not more trained in dealing with it and supporting the victims. So that's one person's very particular ask from a point of some vulnerability or some concern.
And I'm really glad
that person.
No, I'm really glad to answer it, because the short answer is nothing could be further from the truth. But I'm really happy to explain and hopefully reassure the person who's written to you. So we absolutely take seriously all allegations, and many of them are from a very, very long time ago. And in fact, we've had the very recent successful prosecution, haven't we, of Bob Higgins, the ex-Southampton football coach, and his offences go back a very, very long time. And our team were brilliant and were commended in court, and I've never had a case that's had so many letters in from victims to say thank you to your investigators for staying with us, for literally sometimes holding our hands through this, for explaining this process, and coming out the other side, and how brilliantly the team did that. So even if nothing else, that case would justify it. But in terms of the police's role, our job is always so that someone who comes to us, who is brave enough to come forward and say, this happened to me X years ago, is to make that a conversation that feels safe, that they feel they've got space to explain, and we have professional people, very professional people, who are very skilled and trained and accredited to take those reports and to investigate them. The role of investigators is, though, to have an open mind. It is our job to find evidence that supports or comes away from a particular prosecution. Our job is to be professionally curious, if you like. That's what we are here for, and that's what our investigators are trained to do. And they're trained to do that impartially, absolutely supportively, absolutely safely, but their job is to be professional investigators. So we will always, of course, listen to what's told us, we will always record it, and then we will investigate. And as important is keeping the victim, informed of what's going on, and we take that responsibility importantly too. And going back to my last answer, our job is to locate the evidence. It's the CPS's job, the Crown Prosecution Service's job, to weigh that evidence, and then it's down to the court to decide to convict or not later down the line. But all of those investigators who deal very, very expertly with historic reporting are highly skilled, they are highly accredited, it's College of Policing accreditation, and I'm very confident that the person who's written into you, that they would have a very, very professional and warm reception with Hampshire Constabulary.
Good, thank you for that answer, and I hope if they are watching this that they will feel reassured, and if they have something to follow up they will understand that they will be respectfully and professionally treated and should follow it up.
Yeah, please do.
A sort of slight pause between the questions. I know that you and I talk together. I challenge you, you push back. We fight over what's the right resources and the processes to go, and we deal with a high proportion of those things where both of us would like to do differently or have more capacity or need to bottom out an issue. And sometimes that can mask, this is the introduction to, it can mask the significant excellence that is delivered every day by you and your constabulary and other partners. And in the same way, this compass, I'm often find myself asking you for those things where the community have concerns, and I thought this is a very good topic, and your response, a very professional response to reach out and say, from me personally, on behalf of the community, a thank you. Thank you to you and to the teams who I bump into occasionally and have conversations with, who deal with some of these most difficult and high pressure victims of crimes that are unacceptable and vulnerable people. I occasionally try to thank them directly and personally, and their first very praiseworthy response is, Michael, I don't need you to thank me. I am so motivated to do this job professionally and to make a difference for the people that we all serve. Thank you for the thank you, but don't be confused in that I'm not already fully focused on this. I don't need to be encouraged. I do think that they should be encouraged. I do think they should receive a thank you, and I'd be grateful if you, on my personal behalf, in the way that you take a personal interest in this, and on behalf of the communities that we serve, who I do occasionally hear very professionally warming contributions about the excellence of the service.
Thank you.
Please do pass that on to the teams and more generally.
I will.
This is not just a challenge of you, everybody's got to do better all the time. It is also a thank you for what they already do under difficult circumstances, often under pressure, nearly always, but on our behalf, that is much valued.
Thank you. I will do that.
So, on to another question, which might be a challenge, so let's see. This is one that's on those who pay attention's mind, very particularly on the press's mind, on the panel and on councillors' minds. You might be able to predict that it talks about officer recruitment funded by the precept.
Absolutely.
It's been nearly 6 months since my last Police and Crime Commissioner's budget was approved, including nearly all of it that I give to you to do policing. Although the other bits of it are important, I just say to the camera, and really important and added value. But for this year, the budget will bring in 210 officers into the force and some investigators and some ability to train. I was delighted to see some of the new recruits undergoing their training recently and engage with them, struck by their passion and commitment as they learnt a significant amount in a compressed time, but with good humour and not too much evident, sort of moments. And it was good to see them passing out. They were a very commendable, motivated, excellent team of 16 joining your front line now. As the number of new officers coming into the force this year has received this press attention, though, and consistent questioning, as I've said, from councillors and the panel, could you just touch on providing the public with an update on the recruiting numbers that have already been through, timeline for further recruitment, and the particular question is just to confirm, I hope you will be able to do, I believe you must do, that you're on track to deliver this promise to our communities, that the funding from their council tax increase this year will deliver those added values that they've so long wanted.
So the answer is yes, but let me expand a little bit more on that. And first of all, thank you for going and seeing those student officers and spending as much time with them as you did. I think that was great, and I know it went down really well. And they are a hugely impressive bunch. And one thing that I find really exciting as the Chief Constable is being able to bring in fresh and new. You know, it's one of the things that this has unlocked for us, and I'm very excited by it. So absolutely, 6 months ago, your budget meant that we were able to commit to recruiting 210 new officers this year, and that is absolutely on track. So that is this financial year, and that will be delivered. Good. It's not without its challenges for our training staff. They are somewhat busy, but that's fine. I'd much rather that. Sure. And they are certainly up for it. And you're right, that additionally to the officers, we're also recruiting PCSOs to fill those that have moved on to other roles, and increasing our police staff investigators. So there's been a real boost that council tax has directly contributed to. Without it, I'm very, very clear, we wouldn't have been simply not recruiting those. We'd have actually had to lose police officer and staff posts, and that would be a position that none of us wanted to go into. So it is tremendous, and we are on track to do it. As we move into next year, you know, one of the challenges that you and I often speak about is just the difficulty of having an annual planning cycle when one is looking at long-term careers. So that is just one of those difficulties that we wrangle with together, but you know, we'll soon turn our attention to next year. So we've got the 210 officers coming in, 13 courses, each about the size that you describe, about 16 people on each and every one. And after that 15 weeks of intensive training that you saw them at the end of, they're then out in their communities. Yes, they're continuing to be tutored and trained, and there's lots of development out and about, but they are in their communities working. They are operationally, they've got their powers, the same powers as I have as a Chief Constable, and they are keeping their community safer, whether that's in the response, the 24/7 response element, or in their neighbourhood teams. So after 15 weeks, they're out, but it's on track, and I'm really pleased to be able to say so.
Hey, good. And I'll be asking you that question until we can answer the question, and we have delivered that, and our next plan is.
Of course.
Not unrelated to this, I know both you and I celebrate the diverse communities we have in Hampshire, and that you, as race champion for the Constabulary, prioritise an inclusive workforce that represents all our communities. I am, however, not infrequently challenged by those in the community with similar responsibilities that whatever those words are, whatever those intentions are, and whatever the plans that are in place, are we yet reflecting the richness and diversity of all our communities? And I wonder if you could outline what steps you're taking to ensure that Hampshire Constabulary reflects all the communities it serves, and perhaps what activity to enable our communities to feel comfortable and even to advocate members of their community joining policing as a positive choice.
Yeah. This is a real priority, and we've done a lot. We still need to do an awful lot more. So I'm personally the race champion for the force. It's my personal interest, my personal activity that drives particularly on race. And I take it very, very seriously, and the Constabulary takes it very, very seriously. But there is always more to do around improving our diversity and our inclusion for all, to your point. But for policing, race particularly, and policing is a particularly sensitive issue for all the reasons we know, in the history that we've seen, not just in this country but globally. In terms of the service we provide, though, what I'm really proud to say is that after a huge amount of work with our communities, when the public receive the service from the policing, the satisfaction of BME, of visibly different members of the public, is actually higher now than for non. So and that was always quite a gap. It's been a gap nationally for some time. We reversed that gap here in Hampshire through a huge amount of targeted work
so
by
from
lots
a
of
deficit
officers.
to a positive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's really good news in terms of the service that we deliver. In terms of us as an employer, I want us to be the employer of choice for all communities, and we in Hampshire Constabulary look at it from not just a BME, a visible difference, but also from a non-visible. So I'm talking about Eastern European colleagues, Gypsy Roma Traveller colleagues. You know, I want us to be the employer of choice for all, and therefore we look at the whole spectrum, not purely, if you like, the hard stats that of course we need to report elsewhere. So in terms of the officers, and you've met some of them, the new officers coming in, we've got just shy of 7% of BME people coming in. It's still not enough, but that's where we are. We're also caught in a bit of a cycle, which we've done consciously, but because we had a few years of hardly recruiting at all, I want to keep the promise that me and my predecessors made to colleagues who wanted to join us as officers some years ago and couldn't, but then who did really important jobs like call handling, like detention officers in custody, like being a PCSO. So I want to keep our promise to those who we said then, look, join us in these roles, and as soon as our doors open, we want you to come through. So we have a little bit of that to get through in the sense of fishing in our own pool, and I know that is difficult, but I do think it's right to keep our promises. But we're also making really good use of the College of Policing toolkits, which the National Police Chiefs Council have co-authored, which is the very best evidenced practice that is out there for policing to help make itself an employer of choice. And there's toolkits for our community work, for us internally, and so on. And we're doing all of that. We're doing our own activity as well as our own baselining. But to your point around, are we representative of the communities we have right now? We're working with the UK Director of Population Statistics because census data is always, it's a 10-year thing, and therefore my worry is that we deal with an old census as opposed to looking ahead to what we can anticipate into the future. So we're working with that UK Director of Population Statistics to help us understand that, so that we can try and get ahead of the game and target our recruitment to the communities that we should. I can recruit police officers every day of the week. What I want to make sure is I'm recruiting the ones I really need, and that we are trying to be representative, because it's part of our ability to deliver policing. It's part of our legitimacy to represent the communities we serve. So we've done lots around improving our website. We're doing lots around targeting our community campaigns. We're doing an awful lot about really removing any form of bias, conscious or unconscious, of course, in our selection processes. We're looking at every single stage forensically, and have done for some time, and really listening and harnessing the support of our own internal support groups. We have a fantastic internal support group for Black and ethnic minority colleagues, as we do for other underrepresented groups as well, and I'm really listening to them and really using them to hold the mirror up to us to make sure we are never sitting on our laurels and working really hard. But we've got some way to go. Our statistics do not reflect the communities we serve, and I am not prepared to accept that.
And I may come back to it later with a supplementary question, but are you and partners sufficiently focused alongside the approach that you've just described at some of our communities arriving without the same background, the same enabling skills, and that it's before they get to applying that we need to build confidence in communities, the right educational profile, the right opportunities to understand the length of time it might take to catch up, or that our policing organisation, by the time you join, can be inclusive and respect some of those disadvantages of previous experience, or the absence of having some experiences that they'll have to catch up with and learn to engage properly with the whole breadth of their communities from within their own particular community. Do we know that?
We work very hard at that. So I have a group of people who spend an awful lot of time one-on-one actually helping someone kind of unlock the route into policing, because if you look historically, and there was some research last year that talked about all sorts of other professions, I think there was medical and legal, actually the proportion of people coming into the profession who've already got a family background, they've already got that step up, if you like, because they know someone who did it, or a parent who did it, or they've got a route in.
So it reinforces it's a hurdle to your being fully inclusive.
So we exactly. So to that point, I have a dedicated team of people whose job is to one-on-one work alongside people who are interested in joining policing, may have not made a decision yet, but we can help them make the right decision for them, who've had no contact with the police at all in the past and wouldn't even know where to start. Because I worry about us, as other professions should, actually, self-reinforcing within themselves. So that is an issue for us. We'd start young. We have our cadets who are fantastic. Now, cadets are 13, they leave at 17. They go off and do whatever else they do, but I want them to keep being close to us. I want them to keep viewing us as an employer of choice as and when they're ready to come.
So the ability to include all our communities at that preparation, understanding. And I think, again, for myself, that I'm often challenged by the champions in the community of saying it's starts with significant understanding of what policing does, because for many of them it's alien or a separateness between officialdom and the communities, and it's opening that wall, making it permeable. I think that's
exactly.
Really key.
So, and you're right. And of course, we do have a number of very new communities. So we have people who are first generation into this country, who will have their own lived experience of their own policing in their own country. Could be very, very different, and we do understand that. It's part of the root of the neighbourhood policing model. We should be close to new communities and help kind of decipher that and break those perhaps stereotypes down, and also ensure that we do work very hard at that recruitment. And of course, one of the best ways of getting people in is to have role models already within us to demonstrate it. So we look and support those who are already with us to kind of help encourage others to follow in their footsteps.
Okay, thank you. I want to drive back. We were talking about the funding this year to get PCs and investigators and some courses. It won't surprise you, I know, because you get many questions on this too, but PCSO numbers is the next bit. At the last Compass meeting, you set out your local policing strategy, which you stated would include a modest reduction in PCSO numbers this financial year to allow more PCs with their greater investigative and powers generally, which is the right stance. Your professional recommendation to me is the right stance operationally, but it did include a modest reduction, your pair of words. Could you set out your plans for PCSO numbers in 2021 financial year to reassure the public that this valuing the particular nature of a PCSO will be a delivered sense of priority from your earlier statements, because reflected in they're greatly valued by our communities, and that they will remain, the communities wish them to remain, and would not yet understand, if you had a different plan, a key part of our local policing strategy. And if you could, in answering that, maybe present your current thinking on the question I've been asking you about councils and others sponsoring PCSOs where they're able to, and where it's to mutual advantage of both policing and added value to the councils who will be bearing the funding costs to extend that cadre of people in the PCSO group.
Absolutely, thank you. So again, absolutely on track. When we went into this financial year, the commitment was to have 239 police community support officers. We're on track to have that by the end of this financial year, and that is still, whilst, as you say, a modest reduction on what we did have, it is still a very rich PCSO percentage when one looks around UK policing. So our joint commitment very much is to them being a core part of the neighbourhood policing offer. They are, and we are on track to bring them in. I don't have as much flexibility with PCSOs as I do with constables, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in that they are therefore committed to their locality, and I can't move them around because that's their contract. The bad thing is I can't post them where there might be some gaps. So it takes a bit of time, therefore, to get our numbers in all the areas as they should be. It's not as simple as it is moving police officers about. So we're on track in terms of numbers. It is going to take us still a few months to get the right people in the right places, because that relies upon recruitment. And some of those have joined as officers, and of course that we're trying to smooth that out, but it's not a perfect science. So we're on track to do it. And as you referenced in your question, the 80 constables, police officers, new posts into neighbourhoods were also on track to deliver. So that's really exciting, and we will make that commitment as well. In order to keep our 239, we are training new ones coming in. So we've got 4 courses of PCSOs coming in this year, and they're all plumbed in and they're all ready to join us. So the question of councils, local authorities being able to fund a PCSO, we've been working over this for some months. It's something I support, but on the right, on the right terms for everyone's benefit. So we've worked with lots of local authorities who either already have PCSOs whom they fund or indeed want to, and we've established a single version of rules of engagement, if you like. So very clear about their operational tasking, of course, comes from me, and that would remain so, but very much ensuring that operational tasking really is tuned in and listening to what the local community who are going to be additionally paying for them would want to do. So that's been agreed, everyone has worked that through, and that's in place both for those that were on previous agreements and those into the future.
Good.
The issue now is about when. It goes back to getting all the 239 in. That is my priority at the moment, and very much about getting them into the places where they are most needed. So we're going through that, but at the same time we are trickling in PCSOs who are additionally funded. So what I would ask is, talk to us now, absolutely, if you're interested or you think you might be interested in funding additionally. But in terms of implementing, that may take a few months, because I need to get all the other pieces of the jigsaw in place as well. But please do talk to us. My anticipation, asking me today in July, I think at the beginning of next financial year we would be absolutely ready to get all of those in. But as I say, they're starting to trickle in now anyway. So
PCSOs currently serving and who are thinking they might want to be PCSOs, they're part of the value of policing, part of your operational stance, and you value them.
Very much.
Communities who value them already and experience them, who were asking the question, are they still valued? Are our valuable community leaders, which they are, and community support officers, which they are by title and function, and the particular value of them, the communities can be clear that they feature for the future.
Yes.
And those in the areas that are able to and have a desire to be in partnership with you for mutual advantage by helping fund added value and force multiplier additional resource. We're up for that in policy terms, you and I.
Yes.
And you've just given us a caveat to say, ask now, but there's a slight time lag whilst just for capacity to accept that.
It's about the sequencing and putting all the pieces of the jigsaw.
So that should be good news across the 3 PCSOs.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I checked recently, because I'm often challenged, from the statement of in other areas PCSOs are no longer part of the community in the same way as they were. We are still one of the most strongly inclusive of that particular valued part of policing.
Very much so.
Yeah, good. Okay. My last question for today is about Policing Education Qualifications Framework, PEQF, and the changes. And it has some resonance with the inclusiveness of our societies, because the new professional framework is a major change, and one proposed element is the mandatory attainment for all police officers of a degree level qualification. alongside some apprenticeships, which you may want to talk about. I'm concerned about the impact this could have on the diversity of backgrounds and skills within policing. We have many outstanding officers who serve today having learnt their job on the job, is the phrase that's usually used, and it's important that we continue to recognise and sustain routes outside the mainstream that it would be sought by PEQF, particularly from some communities where by economic ability or by cultural norms of their communities, some of the enabling educational standards and engagement might be harder to acquire, and that's what you were answering a little bit of the question of. So it's important to be inclusive, it's important to create opportunities for accreditation and right qualifications, and in an increasingly complex world, some of those qualifications and skills that need to be acquired are changing and updating. But can you give me your assurance about PEQF that it won't, by its early adoption, which I'm not necessarily, I declare, a fan of, not adversely affect the front line through extractions in the short term from already stretched capacity, and your assessment of the impact PEQF will have on the diversity issue, where we must continue to have within policing, which is so important in building and maintaining links with people from a broad range of backgrounds who make up our communities.
No, it is very important, and routes into policing, in my view, it absolutely needed a fresh look. But I would like to bust one myth, which I know is still very much out there. The future is not going to require people to have a degree in order to become a police officer. It is not the case. You can have a degree and you can become a police officer if you want to in the future, as you always have done. And about a third of our recruits already have first degrees. Many have second or third degrees as they come in as constables. But it is not a requirement in the future that you already have a degree. So, but I know that myth is out there, and I will take every opportunity to bust it as I can. What the future will hold, and for us, we're currently planning in the middle of next year, so we're deliberately coming in quite slowly because we want to learn from others, and we want to kind of make sure we have a very smooth landing of what will be a really significant shift for routes in. And the way that someone will be able to become a police officer in the middle of next year in Hampshire is the same as it is around the country. There'll be 3 routes. You can either have a degree already in whatever and come and join us then. You can have a particular police pre-join degree. That's not been sorted out yet in terms of what that degree might be, but it's the apprenticeship model which is starting in the middle of next year and is a huge shift. And actually, to answer the challenge from those, and I do hear it myself around, in my day, one learnt the job on the job. Well, so will these new people, except for they will, because that training is so complex, so nuanced. You saw it, yourself very recently. Actually, they're going to get recognised for that training on the job. They will get a degree at the end of their initial training. So all the skills that people currently acquire, it's a very professional role being a police officer today. It's a very nuanced role. It requires judgment. It requires compassion. There are so many things that a police officer needs to have and to develop throughout their career that I think it's right, actually, that should be recognised as a first degree. So that's what it means. It means you come in, you do your apprenticeship over 3 years from the middle of next year. At the end of that, you will get a degree. And that, I think, is brilliant, because if you like, you won't be going to university and getting a big bill. We'll be paying you, and you'll get your degree for free from us. So that's got to be a big plus. And to your point around diversity, research will tell us that we should anticipate a broader group of people joining us, because that is actually a very attractive offer to coming into policing. Time will tell. It's one of our reasons for going in a little bit later to see how that's nuanced. So we're currently in discussions with our higher education provider. They all bid for it nationally, and we're a consortium that includes Portsmouth University and part of a consortium. And we're in conversation with them right now about ensuring that we plan all of that training in order to ensure we are the the employer of choice for all, as I said in the answer to the previous question. But all the research would suggest that being a graduate profession will actually attract people in a way that perhaps, being seen as in the old days, not now, but the old days, perhaps a blue collar, using that awful phrase, may not have done. So the apprenticeship is about gaining a degree for the complexity of the role that it has always had. And policing is a complex professional skill. I mean, we've talked here about rapes and domestic abuse and historic offences and antisocial behaviour. These are difficult things. They're difficult things for an individual to work through. It requires skill and judgment, and that does require someone who's got those skills within them, which we will develop and build on, but it does require someone who can do that to join us into what then is a fantastically rewarding career. And it is brilliant, and I would encourage anyone today to come and join policing. It's absolutely fantastic. In terms of the final point of abstraction levels, all apprenticeships, whether you're doing that in a bank or with us or whomever else, requires on-the-job learning time. That is a requirement of an apprenticeship. In truth, in Hampshire, we've always been pretty generous around that. So whilst someone today, and the new officers you met the other day, they start at the moment in our response world, they have very significant attachments to investigations, to neighbourhoods, to all sorts of areas, because only if you understand the whole of the policing machinery and mission, if you like, can you understand how you best plug in and how you best contribute. So we already have a very rich offer of attachments, so that officers in their initial period right now are already doing that. So for us, there will be an uplift. We're doing that work out right now about what that difference will be. And at the moment I haven't got those figures, but I will absolutely share them with you, Commissioner, because we're working that through with our Higher Education Institute to work out exactly what will be done with them, what will be done with us, who's going to do it. We're working out that detail now. But as I say, we start from a position of our new officers already spending an awful lot of time in development and continuous professional development.
You will know, and my morning has been rich in the announcement of a frontline first review, and you're going on this afternoon to be at that as one of the leading voices, looking after local policing and other responsibilities that you have. For me, the pressures of the moment are clearly stated in that from the front line. The absence of enough time, the pressures of the nature of the work without any detuning skills, the imposition, and it's for me it's timing. Your answer to the qualification framework that's needed for the future is something I'm very sympathetic to, as long as it doesn't lock out those outliers from some route in, because we would miss them. But what does bother me is the timing of adding pressure to people for that academic study, for adding numbers of hours to their week, often to their day, when already we're hearing that they're stretched, and therefore the read into capacity issues and restoring the right balance. You and I together, and I individually, and you through your network, have made the point that in Hampshire Constabulary we are underfunded significantly each year from the national settlement, 40 million currently. My challenge to you about risks in the budget of last year, to say what more could we do with had we had an allowance to raise the precept by even more, or what more importantly for me, not raising the precept even more, but if we had the right resources from the national settlement, what more could you do to lower the overall policing risk to all our communities and deliver mitigation, prevention, response, all of those things that we interact with, starting with prevention preferably, so that the issue doesn't arise. If PEQF were to be an added pressure for timing, if our extractions, you were talking about, and quite rightly, that you can often create a route to becoming police constable by joining other parts of the organisation, which gives you greater familiarity and learning on the route to individual ambition to become police constables. But the community will not thank either of us or any of our colleagues if the first thing they experience by these improvements to the organisation and processes of career progression is they experience at the front line a reduction in the numbers at a time when we're already stressed. And so for me, that's the challenge for the qualification framework, is the understanding from you of if there is risk, if there is extra demand specific to that right accreditation qualification learning, and it has to be absorbed, that if the resources don't increase, that will require something else to have a reduced priority, whilst that has a strong priority. So
yeah, and that is true. So already today there is much more demand out there than my constabulary through the funding that is available, and I know you push enormously hard about that. There is more than we can do. So it is my job, therefore, operationally, to set the parameters about where our cut-off point is. So you'll always hear me say we will always answer emergencies, we'll always investigate the most serious crime, but beyond that is where the choices are made. And for me, it's no different from a hospital deciding how many hip operations it can afford. It is the fact of public service, and I'm very clear on that. I feel very confident. It dismays me on occasion, but I know the decision and the bar we set is right, because for me, what I need to do is to say to my workforce, you will always be busy, but I will only ask you to do what is possible. So I look very closely at workloads, I will look very closely at deployments, I look very closely at how much each member of staff has got on, because I need them to keep doing it. I need people to be able to serve the public to the very best of their ability for the long run, and I am absolutely not prepared to burn anyone out, frankly. So that is my responsibility, to ensure that I'm asking them to do a lot, but not too much, and we're very good at that here in Hampshire, and we put a big focus on it. And the reality is that we need to cut our cloth accordingly. So we will always be forward-leaning. We will always be, and you challenge me, and rightly so, that we should spend every public pound as wisely as we possibly can. But yes, there are tough choices to be made. But I would still rather have officers and staff and volunteers who are able to keep serving the public to the best of their ability, who are skilled in so doing, and are therefore able to give the quality of service that the public really need. And that requires accreditation, it requires professional development, and at the start of your question, the frontline review that's going to be launched today is really welcome in that regard, because it does show a lot of these tensions that we know here in Hampshire and that we've done a lot together on, but it shows them at that national level, and I think it's very welcome.
Good. That's the end of our questions for today, Chief Constable. I probably should round up with a couple of thoughts. First of all, I hope, if you've been listening to the whole of this, not some edited highlight that's of particular interest to you, that you will see the range of conversations and issues that the Chief Constable and I together deal with, that you will have heard the passion as well as the professionalism of our most senior policing leader in my area, that you will have heard me recognise and thank those who put themselves in the front line and go forward to keep us safe and interact in so very many ways that prevent and deter and create engagement with our communities. It is a difficult time at the moment, and it's important that we are straightforward about the risks and the pressures on individuals, importantly risks and pressures on the vulnerable and victims, and on the reduction sometimes in confidence amongst our communities. It is really important that we work together in partnership. I hope you will have heard that come through again and again as we've been talking this morning, debating the top of the pile issues for the moment, but in all our conversations, partnership with colleagues, partnership with the communities, partnership with individuals who can make a difference themselves one by one and then together in their communities. I really welcome these conversations, as I do the other very many conversations that you and I have on difficult subjects. And I hope that something of the relationship between a Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable and our different roles the Chief Constable as the professional lead for operational policing independently of any political interference, myself as a champion for the communities, but also a challenger and manager of what is a slightly growing but needs to grow more budget that goes towards keeping all of you in Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton safer, and it will continue to be my role to fight for the right resource and to ensure that that's applied across the whole of my budget to things that do contribute to society and particularly keep us all safer, the mantra that I use above all others to inform everything I do. Thank you for watching this Compass.